Antombi,
How are you?
good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm all right. Actually let you in a bit early today, but it's chilled. Just gonna say quick hellos to everybody who's joined the call and thank you for joining us today on the bookshelf. And yeah, today's bookish chat will be with Nik Kirkinis, who basically started his career about 4 years ago. He kicked off as a football journalist and later on became an editor at Soccer La Duma. Nick has, so then in 2017, he released his first book. He wrote his first book with Blana. The book is called The Curse of Teko Modise, which has basically been quite a success since it launched. It was on the Tito Books Christmas list. It was shortlisted for the Tito Award. And yeah, it was, one of the top 10 bestsellers for about 11 months. Fantastic. Yeah, so we thought we'd connect with Nick today to just chat about his journey as a young author and any new exciting projects that he might be working on. So, Nick, how are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thanks. Thanks for the very nice introduction. It's very, very exciting to be on the bookshelf. I think more things like this need to happen.
Yeah. I thought it would be really great to connect with you to just hear more about what you're working on because we know each other in a very different space. And I thought this conversation could be quite interesting to find out how your journey as an author has been. You're pretty young, fresh, and you have lots of ideas. I know this for a fact. So I thought let me just connect with you and hear how it's been as an author, and yeah, how the past 4 years have been.
Yeah, so it's been very interesting. It's a very different thing being a young author. I'm 27 now. I was 23 when my first book was published, and being a young author is quite challenging because you're the youngest in the room, and books at the end of the day are a business, and there's a lot of negotiating and a lot of stakeholders. So you often find yourself in these rooms with the publishers who are all like much more older than you, much more successful and business savvy. And you got to try you got to try and get the business side of it right. And then you also got to try write an exciting book. And I think it's even more challenging to write an exciting book as a younger person because you have to try to think, which market, who am I going to write for? Am I writing for, the old, really dedicated people to literature who are steeped in tradition, or are we trying to appeal to a younger generation? And that's why I think it's really important for young writers to take up the mantle of writing, because what we're dealing with now is a generation of people who've fallen out of love with reading. And I think it's because when you say reading to most people, they have like these high school terrors, flashbacks of reading really boring, thick Charles Dickens or some like really intense book that's very important to the tradition of writing, but like really difficult to get through. So I think it's our job to write exciting content for the younger generation, kind of reimagining how writing should be done and try to rope in this younger generation into reading. Yeah.
So speaking about that process that you just mentioned, that it really is quite a different world, right? And obviously as a young writer, as somebody who is quite new to this room and to this space, you've obviously or probably gotten a lot of criticism as well. As I would imagine that's like the natural way of any kind of writer, any kind of author, artist, How have you dealt with that and how has that impacted the way that you write?
Yeah, so criticism is a really tough one, especially writing, because writing is you taking a piece of your heart, putting it out on a plate, and then giving someone a hammer to smash it in front of you when it's getting criticized. Writing is a very personal thing. It's like straight from you, and the criticism then it's very easy to take personally. So what I do, I have to really tell myself, don't go with your first reaction when you receive criticism. That's really important for me, because as soon as I see a criticism, my first reaction is always like, well, what do you know? Well, no, I did it right. Don't come tell me I did it wrong. But you have to think, you have to stop, and you have to be like, actually, if someone's cared enough about your work to actually offer a critique for it, their critique probably will make your work stronger at the end of the day. So yeah, I think criticism is just about like read the criticism, get up, go make a coffee, go walk around for a little bit, just cool off, and then come back and really absorb it, because it's too easy to take criticism personally, especially something like writing.
Awesome. And how was so I imagine having to write about Teko Modise was quite interesting in itself. I mean, he's a celebrated football player in Africa and the world. How was having to capture his story and make sure that it was authentic, it was true to his nature, it was true to his experience of life? How was that for you, having to really immerse yourself in that space?
It was really challenging. There was a lot of pressure on the book because it was actually the first ever authorized biography of a black South African footballer. So the story had more responsibility than just talking about Teko Modise. We also had a responsibility to bring out some of the history of South African football, some of the culture, some of the traditions. So it's a story that I had to, explain where we had come from in the context to get to this point, and, where South African football was going to, and just using Teko's story as the theme throughout it. But it was quite a sensitive task. Because he's such a loved guy, so, people are like really, they're going to be quite particular about his story. They want it to be a certain way. B, he's a really controversial guy. So we had to include a lot of stories that mention a lot of people's names and not in a good light. We speak about some very famous people and say some pretty hectic stories about them. So, the publishers were very nervous we were going to get sued in the lead up to the book because of how much controversial stuff was in there. So writing it also required this balance of like make it exciting, but like not going too in on one person and criticizing them. And then there's also the cultural thing, being a white author writing about a black person's life comes with its own particular challenge and sensitivity. And I had to make sure that what I was portraying wasn't my version of the story. It wasn't how I saw it through my context and my upbringing. I had to really try to deliver the message through Teko's eyes and through how he had seen it, which was challenging.
I imagine also it's quite not suppose a challenge, or I suppose it's a new thing to have to remove yourself from what you're writing about. Because as an artist, I think, creatives tend to be quite subjective, obviously, and quite linked to the work that they create. But having to actively remove yourself from the story to, give it that authenticity, give it that objectivity, is something different.
Yeah, it's tough. It really is tough because your natural impulse is to involve yourself in the story, but you have to keep telling yourself that it's not about you. Writing is you're a messenger. You need to deliver. You get given the story just in a very raw form, like Teko Modise telling you everything that happened to him, and you have to deliver this message now in a package that's nice for people to absorb. So you have to just keep the bigger picture in mind, and you have to try write with egoless fingers as much as possible. As soon I get really personally bothered when I'm reading a book and the writer starts flaring about themselves too hard, or starts trying to flex too hard in their writing. It's like, no, you're here to deliver a story to me. You're not here to be the one-man actor in the show. It's not what I signed up for when I read the book.
I hear you. So, I mean, what are you working on? What are you working on right now? It's lockdown, it's COVID.
Yeah.
Exciting projects that you've been taking on the side.
Yeah, so something pretty exciting is working up. I remember when I was doing a tour with Teko Modise in Botswana once, he said to a whole group of people, he said to me, Nick, whatever you do next, it just can't be less than me. He's like, if you're going to write someone else's story, it's got to be someone who's on my level or better. He's like, that's the only thing, my only wish for you. And I remember thinking like, that's really a lot of pressure, considering he's like the best footballer of the modern era in South Africa. So I was wondering where this other story was going to come from. And luckily, a little while ago, I was approached by someone who I think is very exciting, someone who I've been a fan of for a long time. And it is a Banyana footballer. Her name is Thembi Kgatlana. She's the African Women's Footballer of the Year. She scored our first ever goal in the World Cup. She also she helped us qualify for one of our first Olympics. She's just incredible, and she comes from Mohlakeng, and we've teamed up to write a story now, and it's a really exciting story. I also think we don't nearly have enough literature supporting our Black women heroes in this country, especially our sporting heroes. And I think in that regard, this book's going to be also more than just a story about her. It's going to be a piece of South African history.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. That there's actually very little literature around our sporting heroes, and I think also, for me, it almost feels like you don't have to wait for somebody to be a national superstar to have their story written about. I mean, there are many talented sports people out there who have incredible stories to tell. And I think we really should highlight those.
Yeah, you know, a big problem about it is that people don't realize that the fortunes of the writing industry and the stories that you get to read and that we get exposed to all very much depend on the publishing industry. They are the gatekeeper of which stories get to us. And what you also got to keep in mind is that the publishing industry, for some reason, is like really dominated by older Afrikaans women. Okay. So now every time you got to keep this in mind, because every time you're pitching a story to them, you got to convince them it's a good story, which is tough because you know they're not watching South African football on the weekends. You know they've never been to F&B Stadium. You know they've never done these things. So you got to show them the importance of it, and they've got terrible assumptions about what stories they think South Africans would want to hear. So a lot of really good stories get blocked there in the publishing phase. And that was certainly a challenge with getting Teko's book out. We got rejected by a number of publishers because they would say ridiculous things, like they would say that there's no way South African football fans will read books. They'd like run on crazy assumptions like that. And we eventually, you know, we got published by Jacana Media. You're quite a forward-looking publishing house. And they luckily saw the value in it. And it was proven that South African fans do read books, because it ended up in the top 10 bestsellers. And I think there's an assumption that people think that there's a certain group of people who don't read books, so they never publish books to people. But if the book's there, if the literature's there, people will come. You know, if you create the subject and you create the love and you put the energy and the interest into the subject, people will be drawn to it.
True. Guys, everybody who is joining, I'm seeing a few people coming in. Please don't be scared to share your questions for Nik as the chat goes. But Nik, I mean, you've just touched on a lot, and I'm actually wondering how you're being an author, how basically, you know, living in this literature world has changed your perspective on things. How has it impacted you in life in general?
I think it's definitely impacted me, but I think it more was the other way. I ended up in the space of being author and writer from being kind of raised differently and being, you know, in different spaces. So I was quite lucky that my route to the writing world was through South African football. And the reason I was so heavily involved in South African football is because it's honestly been an absolute passion and love of mine since I was a little kid. You know, I was watching Kaizer Chiefs games from the age of 5 in the stadium, and, you know, knowing all the players' names. And so that being raised in that setting already brings you up with a different kind of perspective. It's, you know, not being raised around like the braais and the cricket and the rugby, like really like makes you a little bit different. And I think because of that, I managed to end up in this space where, you know, I was meeting a lot of these celebrities, and they realized that they felt comfortable enough around me to tell me their stories. And I think also with these celebrities, it was very rare for them also to meet a young writer, because it's also a concern. Like a guy like Teko, he's a crazy guy. There's a lot of fire in his life, a lot of hectic things happening. And he had lots of guys offering to write his book, but he looked at all these old guys and he thought they couldn't bring that fire across in the writing. And I think for them it was quite a relief to know that there are young writers out there. And that's maybe where... Sorry
to cut you off, but do you think that is a a gap and an opportunity for young writers to, I suppose, if you're looking into going into, you know, writing biographies and all of that, I think that's the gap.
I think there's definitely a gap there. I mean, it's certainly something I thought about before I even got to deal with Teko. I was sitting one day, I was like, why does no one tell the stories of these people that are so loved, that are so legendary, that have done these things? Why is no one telling these stories? And I think, and I thought it was because of a lack of effort from the writers, because people don't think it's possible. And I think what anyone considering being a writer out there, especially a young South African writer, must realize is that with this crazy place we were born into, we're blessed with an abundance of characters around us and stories. There's stories everywhere. Wherever you grew up in South Africa, you've probably been exposed to a lot of crazy stuff. And if you can figure out how to take that, the things you see and the people you meet and all that, and bring it into exciting literature, you've got a career on your hands as a writer. It's not. I feel like a lot of people want to be writers but get scared out of it from the start. They're like, oh, I just don't know how I'll ever make it work. It is tough, but you know, any career worth having is tough, but it's very possible. And yeah, I would really encourage young writers to not get dissuaded. There's gaps, there's people looking for their stories to be told, and there's people looking to tell those stories. It's a perfect match.
I hear you. So I mean, speaking about being a young writer and I suppose taking on this new journey with like Headstrong, how would you describe this chapter of your life? I mean, you're not so amateur, I suppose, anymore. You're going on to writing your second book and you're kind of finding your style as a writer as well. What would you call this chapter of your life? Sure.
I think I'd call this chapter of my life something like leaving the shore, you know. I feel like I'm in the middle of a big leap, a big step from being a boy to a man. And I feel like I'm scared that when you get older, you lose the energy to learn new things and gather new skills. So I'm in this phase right now where I'm trying to gather as many skills and learn as much stuff as I can to take with me, and you know, just trying to shape myself up to be a really good man in society. And you know, I'm just trying to work on all the little things that'll get me there. And I think that also translates to the writing as well. I'm a lot more mature than when I wrote my last book, and I think my style's definitely developed a lot more. And yeah, I'm very, very excited that I get the opportunity to do it again and to show people how much I've grown.
Yeah. No, it sounds very exciting, and I mean, I look forward to your next one. Speaking about books, what are you reading right now? What are you reading? Where are your eyes right now?
So I'm reading a book. It's quite a controversial book. It took me a long time to actually decide to pick it up. It's called The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and I've actually got it down. And it's an interesting book. It's very controversial. A lot of people, it's apparently the most misinterpreted book of all time, is what I've heard. And, it's a story all about like individualism, and the essence of it is that the world only moves forward when great people step up and do great things, you know. And but it's described. It's not. This lady doesn't tell the story directly to you. It's described through a story about two architects. That's how you find out this philosophy. It's very controversial because this book's also known as the Capitalist Manifesto. They say that some people, when reading this book and taking its philosophy, it can lead to some very selfish, greedy behavior. So hopefully that doesn't happen to me. I'm more reading it just for the interest of the story. But yeah, it's pretty well written.
It sounds quite heavy and political, and I don't know, I'm thinking like conspiracy theory type of stories in there.
Got it all. It does have it all.
So what would you say, I mean, of the books that you've read, which books do you think anyone who is on this course should check out?
Okay, so there's 3 books that I actually want to show you that I think are really, really cool. The first one, I suppose, on the subject of sports, just because, you know, I started off a sports writer, so I thought it appropriate. And I want to just say for context, I hate tennis. I've never watched a tennis game in my life. I don't know how tennis works. I don't know how to hold a tennis racket. But this book, Andre Agassi's Open, is honestly one of the top 3 best written books I've ever read in my life. He wrote it himself. And it's just, as I say, I hate tennis, and I found this thing fascinating. It's just written in such a way. And there's something very interesting he does with the style. He wrote the book in present tense, which is strange for a autobiography, right? Because most autobiographies are like, yeah, I woke up and then I went to the stores and then I drove my car. He's like, I wake up, I don't know where I am. It's Monday the 15th. It's like, it's really intense. It's cool. And so I can't recommend that book enough. Whether you're a sports fan, not a sports fan, it's just a brilliant read. And he lets it all happen. For non-sports, this book is fascinating, especially if you're a bit of a history nerd. It's called One Summer, 1927 by Bill Bryson. And it's all about just one. It's beautiful, eh? It's such a beautiful cover. It's all about just one summer in America's history in 1927, where all this really interesting stuff happened. It was like the first Atlantic crossing of an airplane. It was the invention of the production line. It was just a lot of crazy stuff. And he goes in to tell you about all these crazy things that happened. But his writing style is so cool. He gets so distracted. Every time he's speaking of a story, he picks like a couple characters out of that story and goes like deeper into their personal stories and tells you the most fascinating things about them. And it really is entertaining. It's bizarre. You can't believe it's actually real stuff. It's like really part of history. And then a bit of local love. I just finished this and I absolutely loved it. Born to Battle. And yeah, this is a really, really cool book. I suppose anyone who's kind of growing. You've seen it?
Yeah, I've been seeing this one and wondering, should I not?
So I love it because, I mean, so I was like growing up in the 90s, I was huge Kwaito fan. My first CD was an Mzega CD. And like, so I absolutely loved it. And what's cool about this book is it's a collection of like essays. So it's like, and they cover like all different Kwaito artists and how Kwaito varied from region to region in the country as well. And it's very interesting seeing how the different culture of different places affects the music style in that place. And also, it's so beautiful to see something that was such a raw art form when we were experiencing at the time. Kwaito was like in your face, rap, whatever. It's so beautiful to see it being written about so elegantly and so written about as this in the same way people write about Mozart and Beethoven and stuff like these really enthusiastic guys whose music obviously meant the world to them. And yeah, there's some really cool stuff, and yeah, the chapter on Mendoza will make you cry, guaranteed.
So I mean, speaking about this very different book, if you had to, let's say you had to write about anything other than sports or somebody's journey in sports, what would it be? What would you write about?
So I'd love to work towards writing my own novel one day, my own fiction, like really trying to get that going. And I'm always writing that on the side, but I'm hoping for one of my fiction books to be published one day. I don't know why, but I enjoy like romance writing. It sounds weird, but I just find I'm good at it, and like always enjoy writing short scenes like that. So, and also because I'm so passionate about short stories, I love books that are a collection of short stories. I would love to, release my own series of short stories one day.
Nice. Sorry about the echo there, guys. I see Patisal says my sound is echoing. I don't know what to do, but I will try be as clear as possible. Cool. Are there any questions from the floor? Let's check. I didn't pick anything up. Wow, guys. Are we really just like sharing all of the good stuff right now? Coolio. Well, Nick, I think that's really it from me. It's been interesting hearing about your writing journey. It's been interesting hearing about your new project. I'm very excited about that. I think it's going to be quite fantastic to to highlight that life of the Banyana player. Use my words. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that. Where can people find you?
So, I mean, if you want the old book, it's in exclusive books. You can order it online. I think it actually recently completely sold out stock, so they're doing a reprint now. The new book will also be available in exclusive books, CNA, all that stuff. If you want to find me personally, I wouldn't recommend it. I'm quite a boring dude, but you can check me out on Instagram if you really want. And yeah, and especially if you're an SA football enthusiast, we can get to chatting.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think that's really our time for today. Thank you so much for taking a piece of your Sunday and spending it here with us bookish people. And thank you to everybody who joined the call.
No, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. If anybody misses this call or this chat and you'd like to share it with them, definitely do so after this. It'll be saved on my IG. And furthermore, it's going to be live on my YouTube channel quite soon. So yeah, you don't have to, I suppose people don't have to miss this one. Thank you guys for logging in and checking out this chat. Nick, thank you so much, buddy. We'll catch up
Thank you so much. It was so much fun. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you. You too. Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye.